The impossible challenge. The crimson gauntlet stretched across the scarred landscape of Xerion Prime like a metallic scar. For 3 centuries, it had stood as the galaxy's ultimate test of survival, speed, and skill. The course was a nightmare of spinning blades, plasma walls, gravity wells, and predatory machines that had claimed the lives of over 12,000 beings from 47 different species. Not one had ever completed it. The massive viewing platform buzzed with excitement as hundreds of alien spectators gathered for another attempt. Today's challenger would be different, they whispered. Today, for the first time in the Gauntlet's bloody history, a human would attempt the run. Commander Thexkai of the Zephyrian Oversight Committee stood tall on his observation deck, his translucent blue skin shimmering with nervous energy. The Zephyrians had designed the Gauntlet as the ultimate test of their species' natural speed and agility. Even they couldn't complete it. "The human has arrived," announced his aide, gesturing toward the landing platform. Thexkai watched as a small transport touched down. The being who emerged was smaller than he expected. Captain Sarah Rodriguez stood barely 5.5 feet tall, her dark hair pulled back in a simple ponytail. She wore standard protective gear and carried a worn duffel bag. What struck Thexkai most was her calm expression as she surveyed the towering death trap before her. She looked so ... ordinary, muttered Dr. Centaura, the ethereal scientist who had been studying the Gauntlet's failure patterns for decades. Her energy form flickered with curiosity. How can something so small and fragile hope to succeed where the mighty Cronans failed? As if summoned by her words, General Vorth approached their observation platform. The massive Chronon warrior stood, 8 feet tall, his natural armor plating scarred from his own failed attempt 3 months prior. His 4 arms crossed in skepticism as he watched the human below. "I lasted 43 seconds in that death maze," Vorth rumbled, his voice like grinding stone. "My people are bred for war. Our bones are titanium strong, our reflexes honed by millennia of combat. I barely made it past the 3rd obstacle before the plasma cannons forced my retreat. The betting pools were already active. Quilks, the notorious merchant bookmaker, scuttled between groups of spectators on his 6 legs, updating odds on various portable displays. Current betting stands at 847 to 1 against completion," he announced gleefully. 12 to 1 against lasting 30 seconds. Even. Money says she retreats before the first obstacle. Sarah Rodriguez, meanwhile, had completed her registration and stood at the equipment check station. The Vex technician, his compound eyes scanning her gear with mechanical precision, seemed confused by her choices. "Human Sarah Rodriguez," he clicked in the universal tongue. "Your equipment selections are ... unusual. You have declined enhanced reflexive implants, gravitational stabilizers, and plasma-resistant coating. You carry only basic protective gear, and..." He paused, examining her duffel bag. ... rope, metal tools, and what appears to be adhesive compounds. Sarah smiled. "That's right. Sometimes the old ways work best." The technician's mandibles twitched in what might have been concern. "The Crimson Gauntlet has defeated the greatest warriors of 47 species. The Zephyrians, who built it, cannot complete their own creation. The probability of success without enhanced equipment approaches 0. Probability," Sarah said, shouldering her bag, "has never stopped humans before." The pre-run briefing took place in a sterile white chamber overlooking the course. Thexkai activated the holographic display, showing each section of the gauntlet in deadly detail. The course spans 2.3 kilometers and contains 17 distinct challenge sections, he explained. Section 1 features rotating plasma barriers that activate in random patterns. Most challengers are eliminated here. Those who survive face the gravity maze, where localized gravitational fields will crush unprepared beings against the walls. The hologram shifted, showing twisted metal corridors and glowing energy fields. Section 3 contains the Blade Gardens, thousands of monomolecular cutting edges that emerge from floor, walls, and ceiling in synchronized patterns. Section 4 is the Acid Rapids, where corrosive streams must be crossed while under fire from automated defense systems. Sarah listened intently, occasionally asking technical questions that surprised the briefing officer. She wanted to know about power sources, recycling patterns, and maintenance schedules, details that seemed irrelevant to a challenge of speed and reflexes. The middle sections grow progressively more difficult, Vexkai continued. The Predator Den houses cybernetic hunters programmed with the combat patterns of 73 different warrior species. The thermal maze reaches temperatures that would melt most metals. The final section, which no being has ever reached, remains classified. After the briefing, Sarah requested a closer look at the course perimeter. This unusual request generated considerable discussion among the officials, but regulations allowed for pre-run reconnaissance. A small hover platform carried her along. The gauntlet's outer wall. General Vorth joined the observation flight, curious about the humans' methods. "What do you see that we have missed?" he asked as Sarah studied structural details with intense focus. "Patterns," she replied simply. "Everything has patterns. Your gauntlet is incredibly sophisticated, but it follows rules. Rules can be understood. Once you understand them, you can work with them instead of against them." Work with them? Vorth's tone suggested this concept was foreign to him. This is a test of combat. One fights obstacles, defeats them through strength and speed. Sarah smiled as she observed a section where failed challengers had left scorch marks on the walls. Maybe that's why everyone keeps failing. They're fighting when they should be dancing. Dr. Centaura, monitoring from the main platform, focused her energy senses on the human during this reconnaissance flight. What she detected puzzled her greatly. Most challengers radiated fear, aggression, or desperate determination before their attempts. The human showed none of these emotional signatures. Instead, she detected something unprecedented: curiosity and genuine excitement. The viewing stands filled as word spread through Zirian Prime's orbital stations. Representatives from dozens of species arrived to witness what most assumed would be another spectacular failure. The Cronins sent a delegation of their finest warriors. The Ethereals manifested additional observer forms. Even the reclusive builders emerged from their deep city to watch. Betting pools expanded rapidly. Some species wagered on how quickly the human would retreat. Others bet on which specific obstacle would force her withdrawal. A few optimistic souls placed small wagers on her surviving longer than 30 seconds, though even these were considered. Foolishly hopeful Sarah spent her final preparation hour in an unusual manner. While other challengers had used this time for meditation, equipment checks, or combat preparations, she sat cross-legged on the ground near the starting line, sketching diagrams in the dirt with a stick. She drew patterns, timing sequences, and what appeared to be dance steps. Quilk scuttled over, his merchant instincts curious about any information that might affect his odds. "Human being," he chittered, "what calculations do you perform? Perhaps Quilks could offer favorable betting opportunities based on your mathematical assessments?" Sarah looked up from her dirt sketches, just figuring out the rhythm. Every complex system has its own music. You just have to learn to hear it. The merchant's eye stalks twisted in confusion. Music? Rhythm? These concepts had no relevance to survival challenges. He scuttled away, muttering about human irrationality. As the hour approached, spectators pressed against viewing barriers. The energy was electric, filled with anticipation and morbid curiosity. Camera drones positioned themselves for optimal recording angles. This would either be history in the making or simply another tragedy to add to the gauntlet's grim tally. Sky. Voice echoed through the arena's amplification system. Attention, all observers. The challenger will now take position at the starting line. As per regulations, emergency retrieval systems are standing by. Medical teams are prepared for immediate response. The course will activate in 60 seconds. Sarah Rodriguez walked to the starting line with steady steps. She had changed into lighter gear, forgoing much of the protective equipment other challengers considered essential. Her movements were relaxed, almost casual, as if she were preparing for a morning jog rather than a potentially lethal gauntlet. Countdown began. 50 seconds. The first section's plasma barriers flickered to life, creating a deadly light show of energy streams. 40 seconds. Mechanical systems throughout the course hummed to life, their ancient machinery awakening like a sleeping predator. 30 seconds. The gravity generators reached full power, creating localized distortions in space-time itself. 20 seconds. Sarah balanced lightly on her toes, like a dancer preparing for performance. 15 seconds. She closed her eyes briefly, and observers noticed her lips moving silently. 10 seconds. Her eyes opened, bright with determination and something else. Joy. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. The starting horn blared across. Zarian Prime. Sarah Rodriguez smiled and stepped forward. Into the crimson gauntlet. Breaking the impossible, the first plasma barrier activated with a sound like tearing reality. Streams of superheated energy crisscrossed the opening corridor in patterns that had defeated the reflexes of beings whose reaction times were measured in microseconds. The Zephyrians themselves, with their naturally enhanced nervous systems, had never successfully navigated this opening section. Sarah didn't try to dodge the plasma streams. Instead, she studied them for 3 full seconds, ignoring the gasps from the observation decks. The streams followed a complex but repeating pattern, cycling through 17 different configurations before repeating. Most challengers tried to dart through gaps that appeared random but weren't. On the 4th cycle, Sarah moved. She didn't sprint or leap or dive. She walked forward with measured steps, her body swaying slightly left and right, timing her movements to the plasma pattern's rhythm. She passed through the deadly light show like she was strolling through falling rain, each step perfectly timed to avoid the energy streams by inches. Impossible, breathed General Vorth from the observation deck. The pattern cycles too quickly for conscious calculation. Dr. Sintara's energy form flickered with intense excitement. She's not calculating. She's intuiting. Somehow she's feeling the pattern rather than thinking it. Sarah emerged from the plasma maze in 18 seconds, completely unharmed. The viewing stands erupted in shocked murmurs. In 3 centuries, no challenger had cleared the first section without at least minor plasma burns. The second section, the gravity maze, activated as she approached. Localized gravitational fields created crushing zones that could flatten most beings against the metal walls. The maze's design forced challengers to navigate through narrow corridors where these gravity wells overlapped and interacted. Previous challengers had used brute strength to fight through, enhanced suits to resist, the forces or speed to minimize exposure time. All had failed. Sarah did something different. She had noticed during her reconnaissance that the gravity wells followed the structure's power distribution system. By understanding the engineering, she could predict where the strongest fields would manifest. More importantly, she realized the fields could be used rather than just survived. She entered the maze and immediately allowed herself to be caught by the first gravity well. Instead of fighting it, she used its pull to launch herself toward the next corridor section. When the next field tried to slam her into a wall, She pushed off the wall and let the gravitational force carry her around a corner. She was surfing. The gravity fields using their own power to propel herself through the maze. What should have been crushing forces became assistance. She moved through the section like a pinball, but every bounce was controlled, every impact calculated. 16 seconds later, she emerged from the gravity maze. The observation decks had fallen completely silent. Wilkes, the betting master, stared at his odds displays in shock. Several species were already demanding their wagers back, claiming the human must be using illegal enhancements. But the sensors showed no artificial augmentation, no hidden technology. She was doing this with nothing but natural human capability. Third section, the Blade Gardens, began activating as Sarah approached. Thousands of monomolecular cutting edges emerged from every surface, creating a three-dimensional maze of death. The blades moved in synchronized patterns, their edges capable of slicing through any known material. Sarah paused at the entrance, watching the blade patterns for nearly 10 seconds. To the observers, it looked like she was frozen with fear. In reality, she was learning another rhythm, understanding another system. The blades didn't move randomly. They followed maintenance patterns designed to keep the cutting edges sharp and the mechanisms clean. By understanding their purpose, she could predict their movement. More than that, she realized the blades created wind patterns as they moved, and those air currents could be felt and used for navigation. She entered the Blade Gardens with her eyes closed. The watching aliens couldn't believe what they were seeing. She moved through the deadly maze blind, guided only by air currents and sound. She ducked under sweeping edges, stepped sideways to avoid rising blades, and rolled beneath horizontal cuts. Her movements had an almost supernatural grace, as if she were dancing with the machines trying to kill her. When she opened her eyes at the section's exit, she had passed through without a single cut. Time, 14 seconds. "She's not human," whispered one of the Chronon observers. "No natural being could possess such abilities." But Dr. Santara was beginning to understand. She is completely human. That's what makes this possible. She's using capabilities that other species have enhanced away or never possessed. Pure intuition, pattern recognition, adaptability. She's not trying to be stronger or faster than they all. Of course, she's being smarter. The fourth section was the acid rapids. Corrosive streams flowed through channels, while automated defense systems fired from concealed positions. The streams were too wide to jump, too deep to wade through without protective equipment that Sarah wasn't wearing. She studied the section for a moment, then opened her duffel bag and removed the rope and tools the Vex technician had questioned earlier. Working quickly, she fashioned a simple but effective zipline system using the chamber's existing structural elements. The defense systems tracked her movement and fired, but she had anticipated their targeting algorithms. By swinging in a specific pattern, she stayed ahead of their ability to predict her position. She crossed the entire section without touching the acid or taking a single hit from the automated weapons. Time, 21 seconds. The longest section yet, but only because she had needed time to construct her crossing system. Commander, Vex Kai found himself gripping the observation rail so tightly that the metal was beginning to deform under his fingers. She's treating each section like a puzzle to be solved, rather than an enemy to be defeated. "That's exactly right," said a new voice behind him. Everyone turned to see who had spoken. It was Elder Korvath of the Builders, the ancient species that had constructed much of the galaxy's most sophisticated technology. The Builder rarely spoke to other species, considering most of them too primitive for meaningful conversation. "The human understands what we built into that course," Korvath continued, his crystalline voice carrying centuries of wisdom. "We designed each section to test different aspects of survival capability, but we also built in solutions for those clever enough to see them." She sees them. The middle sections proved even more spectacular. In the Predator Den, instead of fighting the cybernetic hunters, Sarah used their own hunting patterns against them. She led one predator into another's territory, causing them to fight each other while she slipped past Dot in the thermal maze. Where temperatures reached metal melting levels, she used the convection currents to navigate and the thermal updrafts to leap across obstacles that should have been impossible to traverse. Each section that should have taken minutes to complete, if completion were possible at all, she finished in seconds. Her methods were so unconventional that the course's designers had never anticipated them. She was exploiting not weaknesses, but the very engineering that made the gauntlet so deadly. As she approached the final sections that no being in galactic history had ever reached, the entire observation platform had fallen into stunned silence. Even the betting pools had stopped taking wagers. Quilks sat motionless, his compound eyes fixed on displays, showing odds that no longer made any sense. The 15th section was a combination of everything that had come before: plasma, gravity, blades, acid, predators, and heat all combined into a nightmare obstacle that the designers had intended as the ultimate test. It was meant to be impossible. Sarah stood at its entrance for 30 seconds, longer than she had paused anywhere else. This wasn't hesitation. She was conducting the most complex analysis yet, understanding how all the different systems interacted, finding the symphony in the chaos. When she moved, it was like watching poetry written in motion. She flowed through the combined obstacles using every technique she had demonstrated earlier, but now integrated into a seamless performance. She surfed gravity wells while avoiding plasma streams, used blade-generated air currents to navigate around predators, and employed thermal updrafts to leap over acid channels. She completed the combination section in 38 seconds. Only 2 sections remained. The observation decks were now packed beyond capacity as word spread throughout the system. Ships were arriving from neighboring worlds to witness something that was rewriting the galaxy's understanding of what was possible. The 16th section was pure energy, a corridor of raw power that was meant to disintegrate anything that entered it. Previous test probes had been vaporized instantly. The section had no solutions because it had been designed to have none. Sarah studied the energy patterns, and for the first time, she looked genuinely puzzled. She spent 2 full minutes examining the section, longer than she had taken for all the previous obstacles combined. Then she smiled. She had realized something that the course designers had missed. The energy field was so powerful that it created its own electromagnetic effects. These effects included a narrow null zone directly down the center of the corridor, where the conflicting energy streams canceled each other out. She walked straight down the center of the energy corridor in 12 seconds, untouched by forces that could have powered a small city. The final section activated. What emerged defied description. It wasn't just obstacles or traps or tests. It was a synthesis of everything the galaxy's greatest minds had learned about challenge and survival. Reality itself seemed to bend and twist in the final chamber. Sarah stood at its threshold and laughed. The sound carried clearly through the arena's audio systems, and it was pure joy. She wasn't laughing at the challenge or in hysteria or fear. She was laughing with delight at encountering something so beautifully, impossibly complex. She entered the final section dancing. What happened next would be debated by scientists and philosophers for generations. She moved through impossible geometries, navigated paradoxical spaces, and solved challenges that existed partially outside normal spacetime. Her movements were no longer just physical, but seemed to engage with fundamental forces of reality itself. When she emerged and pressed the completion button, the timer read 4 minutes, 37 seconds. The silence that followed was absolute. Then Elder Corvath began to applaud. The sound echoed strangely in the vast arena. One by one, Others joined in. First the builders, then the ethereals, then the Zephyrians. Even General Vorth, his 4 massive hands creating thunderous impacts, applauded with genuine respect. Sarah. Rodriguez stood at the finish line, breathing hard but grinning widely. Her equipment was battered, her clothes were torn, and she had minor cuts and burns from her passage. But she was alive, whole, and victorious. Thexkai descended from the observation platform to meet her personally. How was all he could manage to ask. Sarah wiped sweat from her forehead and shouldered her now empty duffel bag. You built it to test warriors and athletes and enhanced beings. But you also built it to be solvable, because that's what good engineers do. You just never expected someone to try solving it instead of conquering it. Dr. Sintara materialized. Nearby, her energy form flickering with intense curiosity. But the calculations, the timing, the spatial awareness required. How did you process so much information so quickly? I didn't, Sarah replied. I stopped trying to think through it and started feeling it. Humans are really good at that. When we stop getting in our own way. General Vorth approached, his scarred armor gleaming in the arena lights. I must ask, are all humans capable of such feats? Sarah considered the question seriously. Not this specific thing, no, but every human is capable of something. We're good at impossible things, because we don't always know they're impossible until after we've done them. The implications of her statement rippled through the assembled crowd. In one afternoon, the galaxy's understanding of human capability had been fundamentally altered. The species that had seemed so ordinary, so limited by their lack of natural armor or enhanced reflexes or energy manipulation abilities, had just demonstrated something that might be far more valuable, the ability to find solutions where none seemed to exist. As news of the achievement spread throughout the galaxy, reactions varied wildly. Some species began studying human methodologies, trying to understand how such adaptability might be learned. Others worried about the implications of a species that could seemingly overcome any obstacle through pure ingenuity. Sarah Rodriguez, for her part, accepted the congratulations and attention with characteristic human grace. When asked what she planned to do next, she grinned and said, "Well, you mentioned you guys might have something harder." A question that haunted alien civilizations in the weeks and months that followed was simple but profound. If humans could do this with just their natural abilities, what else might they be capable of? The galaxy was about to find out.